Is it on now? Hello? Yes. Okay, it's a very short walk from there to here. I could have done with a bit longer, but I will sit down, and we've got half an hour to lunch when you can all enjoy that lovely walk to the Bohemia room at 12:30. So thank you very much. We deliberately chose this session in the conference because it's a little bit easy sometimes to just look at the pictures that Daniel shared with us and think that that's walkability solved in a city, because these are the great actions we take to make the walkable environments on our streets. But for a city to function in the complexity that we know that it does now, it is this integrated approach, and Stockholm has been doing a great job on that. And anyone who attended the session yesterday looking at walkability and access to public transport stations here in Hong Kong would have seen the way the MTR is building connectivity into neighbourhoods through the way that they design their public transport stations. So they're not only providing access to trains, but they're providing access to the surrounding neighbourhoods as well. So you can use the stations to move through those neighbourhoods. So to lead off on our discussion today, I wanted to pick up on a few issues, and it always makes me laugh because no matter where we go in the world, one of the reasons people don't walk is the weather. So if anyone lives in one of those environments where that's not an excuse, please let us know, because it doesn't matter how hot, how dry, how windy, how snowy, how wet, how humid, people will find an excuse not to walk. But sometimes people actually need an enabler, and in my world, in the language you use, that every journey begins with the first step. So public transport is a journey extender. So when we want to move through our cities further than we have time or capacity to walk, then we look to other modes. And unfortunately, very often that default mode is the motor vehicle. But in a city like Stockholm, it can very often be the public transport network. And that's what we've seen in the presentations. And I'm particularly interested, I wanted to start actually with Eric, because you talked particularly about safety. And it's such a crucial determinant as to whether people choose to move, particularly for women, and particularly for children, and for adults to let children move around their cities, is to feel that they are secure. And to hear a public transit authority take responsibility for the environment outside the system is really great. To recognise that you need to enable people to walk to the station, but not just enable them, but encourage them by making it feel safe, by taking responsibility for those surrounds. And I must say this is quite groundbreaking to me to hear that. And I'm wondering where that prompt came from to begin to look at that in Stockholm particularly.
Let's see if this is on, is it? Yeah. Well, I mean, our overall goal is to increase the number of passengers into our system. So for us, it's a very natural step to start with, to identify the safety problems that might be there, and to try to do something about it. But like I said, it's like almost 30% of the population has rejected public transports because of the safety issues. So for us, that was a very important step to take, and to engage other parts of the society as well, such as the city planners and the politicians as well, of course.
So you went looking for reasons people weren't choosing public transport, and discovered that 30% was the issues were about safety.
It is, and not only in the case of number of passengers, it's also about the customer satisfaction, and that is connected with our contract with the transport authorities. So for us, it's very important to have a high level of customer satisfaction. So for us, the whole trip and the surround areas is also important because it affects actually the customer satisfaction. So for us, it was a natural step.
And at your stations, generally in Stockholm, do you prioritize the walking and the walkability access to those stations? Very often in cities, they have lovely driveways in for people to park or to drop and, to kiss and kiss and ride. You're lucky if you get the kiss. But if people just drive in and drop off and things like that, and there's no dedicated walking access, particularly on the more urban, suburban stations. But is walking prioritised in terms of inviting people to walk to the stations over that driving access, generally speaking?
Well, I think that Daniel is the best person to answer that question, actually.
Well, I would say in the city of Stockholm, I'm not talking then about the region. And near the subway system, I think we have prioritized the walking when the metro system were built in the 50s, 60s. So of course there are cars, but we don't prioritize cars, and we are trying to remove or the kiss and ride places near such stations and try to have surroundings where there are not a lot of cars. We have some places where we have parking garages for people coming with the cars from other parts, where they don't have the public transportation, then switch to the metro system, of course. But it should not be something that makes the place as a car place. You should feel that the public transportation system is something you walk to, and you should live near the public transportation system. And that we are trying to build a city in that way. And when the city is growing, we said that we should not build houses or villas and such things in a way that you need a car. And we're trying to change the places where we build apartments.
Yeah. Can I just add two things? One to what Eric said, because I think that, as you mentioned, safety and security is extremely important to make more people choose public transportation. And we can see, when we are measuring it in Stockholm, we can see that we have a rise when it comes to feeling secure while using public transportation, while on the bus, in the metro, in the station. But when you walk from the bus stop or the bus stand, or when you leave the metro station or the commuter train station, then is when you feel unsecure if it's late at night. So that is why I think it's very crucial to understand that the walking environmental, the geography and the environment while walking and moving from the station to your home or where you are going, that's where we need to do improvements when it comes to safety and security first, because that is where people feel most unsafe and most unsecure. And we are doing a lot of things there, as Eric mentioned, on the metro side, but also at large when we are looking upon our cooperation with the municipalities that are responsible for the parks and the street lights and so on, doing what we call special safety walks together with the municipalities and people in public, working with public transportation and so on, in order to, and with different NGOs that are working with safety and security issues, in order to identify what should be done on this road or in this park in order to make it more secure. Then just shortly mention what Daniel said, I think we have a lot to do still while rethinking how we want Stockholm to grow and to develop, because we did the same mistake as many others did back in the 1960s and 70s, while we of course built a good commuter train system, for example, or metro train system, but in many times we built a metro station and nothing surrounding it, or a commuter train station and nothing surrounding it except a bus terminal. So people were taking the bus to the station, but they were not living around the station. And we have, just to mention one example, we have commuter train stations, a fantastic, well-built commuter train system with stations that has only 100 passengers going on and off each day. And when you go off at that station, just 10-15 minutes from the center of Stockholm, you just see fields and a bus stand. And of course that is not a good way to use billions of investments in a public transportation system. So I think we have to much deeper dig into to making more of urban development surrounding our station, and have much more of cooperation with the municipalities and the city planners when it comes to that.
It's interesting the responsibility you're taking for the surrounds. I think that's a critical factor, because if you don't make it safe, then you don't enable people. Especially in Sweden, you have very long, dark winters. So I'm not surprised that the hot dog stand proves very popular, because it's both warming and lighting up in the surrounds. I wonder also, with the work that you're doing, Daniel, if you're connecting some of those walkability features through to the metro stations as part of this program, or if you're seeing that integration of those improved walkability streets as part of that. They're obviously part of a broader program across the city, and you're changing the shape and the allocation of space. But is there a priority around some of these routes with the public transport stations and bus stops as well, because bus stops can often be neglected places in our cities?
Of course, we are working with a mobility strategy to connect all the ways to move in the city by walking, cycling, going by bus, the metro system and such things. And we are talking about it all the time to make the intermodality better. You should not have one way to transport in Stockholm. You should use the best way for the best journey. And of course you should think about the climate. So we're trying to lower the amount of cars and how people are driving their cars. And I'm head of the parking company in Stockholm. And we are now, today, we are integrating cycle stands in the parking garages. So you can take your cycle to the garage and then go further on with your car, or you can have your cycle in the garage and you think, okay, today it's fine whether I take the bike instead of taking the car. So we're working a lot of that with these things. But with the walkability projects we are working with, one of those that I showed in the center of Stockholm is between a metro station and the commuter train station, and people walk the streets to change from the commuter train to the metro system, and we choose that street because there's a lot of people walking there. Yeah, and of course because of Christopher lives there, that's a way to make a livable street. If we choose the street where there's not a lot of people, it wouldn't be a nice street for walking. Of course you could walk there, but you need a lot of people to make it feels like something else than just a street. So we're working with places where we have these connections to make it a nicer city. And of course we're going to try to have pedestrian streets where there's no such connections, but we are, of course, to interlink such things. And next year we're going to, I'm not going to open, but Christoph is going to open a new commuter station in the central of Stockholm. And we have a long pedestrian street in the center called Drottninggatan. And I'm now trying to connect this street where we have today the city center station and this new commuter station, so you can walk between these places because there's going to be a lot of people there, and we want to use these possibilities.
I'd like to open up to questions from the floor. Yes, please. Someone's got the microphone. I like the lions, by the way. I've been to Stockholm. I know about your lions. And I thought they looked like they were all just sleeping for the winter. But do you put them away in a shed?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, we do.
My name is Supriya Sen from McKinsey. Thank you very much for a very enlightening set of presentations. Something very interesting caught my eye when you said MTR as a new role for MTR as a platform for mobility, but not just in a technical sense, but in an institutional sense. Could you talk more about that?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, yes, it's on. MTR is trying to take as much responsibility as we can. Not only provide technical solutions, of course, but also trying to be a part of the rest of the society in order to improve the whole public transport system. So that's, I mean, like I said before, it's a very natural step for us to engage other people and other organizations to reach for the same kind of goal. Yeah, that's. I think that's how I would answer that question. It's public transport should be green, not mean. That's why we're caring about the safety issues. Thank you.
Is that finished? Did you want to have a follow-up on that, or are you?
Yes, if I could, if I
can
may.
see that.
The reason I asked is because we're so much having to move beyond competition to the bigger prize, basically, for climate change. So, on the other hand, I come from cities in Asia where there's so much of silo thinking, even in the different institutions which are supposed to enhance the urban experience. So it's very difficult. And earlier in the session, someone asked, how can individuals who want to make that difference engage? So when you mentioned that there is a platform and there are responsible policymakers as well as citizens as well as private sector partners and developers all trying to engage for climate change, is there a way that cities like Stockholm can consider having this at the forefront? So it's not easy, but maybe necessary.
I think that's possible. I mean, but to be honest, I don't know if the climate change issue is the most important thing for the police, for example, to identify unsafe places in the public transport system or the surrounds. But of course, it's I mean, that's an effect of the work we're doing together, that we will get people to choose the public transports instead of the car if they feel secure and safe. So it's a side effect, but a good side effect.
Thank you.
Ben Rossiter from Victoria Walks in Australia, and particularly Melbourne, so MTR, I think it's relevant there. Look, what you're saying is really good news, and it's really pleasing to hear, and I just want to take it a little bit further, because I think in Melbourne there's probably the two big obsessions with particularly the trains are getting to run on time, and two, the issue of car parking. So our train stations in middle and outer areas are increasingly surrounded by a sea of car parking, and never ever expanding sea of car parking. And that's not the fault of train providers. That's really bad planning and some very powerful lobby groups. But I guess the question I've got is any advice you would have for those of us interested in walking and walkability of how we can get public transport providers, tram, train and bus, that often work against walkability if it impacts on a timetable, like tram putting up unnecessary pedestrian fencing, bus providers lobbying against any pedestrian amenity for people to get to stops. What advice can you give for us interested in walking to get, I guess, the providers to really work with us to make more walkable networks into train and bus and tram stations and stops?
Well, that's a very difficult question for me to answer, but any advice? I think it depends on what kind of traditions you have in your own city. And I've never been to Melbourne, but I guess the car is, it's traditionally large I mean, it has a high position in the transport system.
50% of people get to train on foot, and over 90% get to bus and tram on foot, but we still don't prioritise it. We ignore that fact.
All right. Now, yeah. Well, I'm not a politician here, but I think the best advice is to engage the politicians and try to engage other NGOs and.
Well, I don't think there's not one solution to fit all here. I think as Eric mentions, I think much is about which kind of cultural habits and other things you have in your city and in your society, of course, will impact on what to do and how to do it. But I think a few things that I think is important is, of course, you need to have a good cooperation between the regional level, if they are responsible for public transportation, and I would say the local, the city level, because that will make it possible for you to well, in a better way, plan where you want to have the walking streets and how they will connect with the lanes for used for buses or the train stations or the metro stations in a good way. To in some way build that kind of network. As Daniel mentioned, for instance, the street where there were where a walking street was tried in between a commuter train station and a metro station this summer, I would say is one example on that kind of well, combined planning or so to speak. Another thing I think is important, and that is something that we are discussing right now, at least at the regional level, and that is to use or bring in people walking as part of the traffic analysis, that when it comes to which kind of ways do people use to move around in a city, because today we only look upon traffic, and we look upon cars and taxi and cycling and bicycling and the metro and other public transportation, but we don't consider walking part of the traffic system. And I think that is one important step that we should all take to bring that into the analysis that we do when it comes to getting a full picture about which kind of traffic do people use, and to see walking as a full worthy traffic solution in a way that we haven't done when we have planned our cities.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? It's very quick. I guess to be more direct, my question is, how do we get multinational big providers like MTR and the tram network to possibly bite the hand that feeds them to say to governments, you've got to do a hell of a lot better about getting people walking to public transport?
You need to have a good and very clear efficiency paragraphs within the contract, I would say.
This lady down here.
Yes, I have a question to Christopher, and that's about the one ticket fare. In Hong Kong, we have a very strange situation that our operators are competing with each other, so that you have to buy a separate ferry ticket, a separate bus ticket, a separate MTR ticket. And in a way that, I don't know what the logic is, but in a way it prevents innovation. Like, for instance, we cannot make a decision on having clean energy for all the operators, so we still have some, because it's only, the competition is on price. And so it would be very odd in Stockholm if you have the bus companies competing with the metro, wouldn't it? But this is the situation in Hong Kong. When did you decide to have this kind of one system, one fare in Stockholm?
We actually we had a situation back in Stockholm that was similar to the one in Hong Kong historically, where we had different municipalities and different operators running their own public transportation systems and bus lines and commuter train lines and so on, and with different ticket fare systems and so on. Back in 1974, actually, we decided to put all the public transportation into one authority. I think that has been serving Stockholm very well in order to, as you say, to get the most and the best out of the public transportation system, and also combining it and link it together, not let it stand towards each other when it comes to different sorts of traffic. Of course, we still have some problems with when we contract and bus operators. Sometimes they of course want to drive the bus parallel to the commuter train, and they say that they can do it more efficiently and so on. But I think that we, in a way that many other cities don't have, can force through a more efficient way of using the money we have for a better overall public transportation system than we otherwise would have had. And I would also say that combining the traffic is one thing, but I think also combining the ticket fares is also very crucial to actually get get the most out of this kind of system that we have in Stockholm. So I would say it has served us well. I think it's very important to continue to build upon that system, because I think it will be very crucial to bring a very a region of variety when it comes to rural and urban areas and different kinds of needs together in a good way. So I can speak about that for hours. So I will pass the microphone on to someone else. Perhaps.
Maybe you can go to lunch. I know in Queensland, in southeast Queensland, they've done integrated ticketing across modes using a card like the Oyster card. So that might be a case study you wanted to follow up as well. We are out of time. My screen actually says time's up, so I can't even make a choice about that. But if anyone's got a last burning question, yes, I thought there was. I was going to come to Peter as well, but I'm not sure from there.
I have a question here. My name is Chong Gott. I live in Hong Kong. Question to Daniel. In a few of your slides, you show that you're clearing the roads, the street, so that people could walk better. But then I also see that you have the restaurant, put up more tables and chairs on the sidewalk, and then you're taking up the parking bay along the street, so that more tables, and you turn it into car parks to dining, right? So in Hong Kong, the situation would be that, hey, why are you clearing the roads for the merchants, for the restaurants, so that they could do more business by putting more chairs and tables on the road? Then you're not giving up the road for the walkers. You're just doing it, clearing it for the restaurants. How do you solve it? There be objections from the walkers, from the public, and there will be objection from the car owners. Then why are you taking away the car meter? And then I could not park my car, but then you let them to use up that parking bay for tables and chairs and doing business. How do you solve that? And wouldn't there be an outcry from the city councillors to object to that? How do you handle that?
Well, we handle it by trying to do it. We say, first of all, we tried last year to remove the cars, and the car owners were quite angry, really angry. And all the newspapers, they were trying to say that I was a lunatic, would do something else than be a politician. But after that, and when we started it this year, there's been no quarrel about this. They like it. I haven't had any email about cars removed from the street, because they experienced that we could use the street in another way. They could go out, sit in the restaurant, have a beer or a glass of wine, or just sitting there, and they loved it. They didn't know we could do this with the streets. And you said we put the restaurants in the street. Well, the streets are quite broad, so you can walk in the middle. It's no problem. There's a lot of space for those who want to walk. Look another way, and then the next year it's marvelous and everybody loves it.
Okay, well, on the fact that everyone loves it, sounds like a very good place to finish the session today. Thank you very much for coming and talking about Stockholm and integrated mobility. It does help start bridging some of that silo thinking that we're all worried about. Thank you everyone for your questions and attention, and please enjoy your lunch. Thanks.